We're one day into this transfer portal window, and the Auburn Tigers have already reached out to a ton of studs.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zac Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. It's portal season, and we are dapping it up with Montgomery radio legend Darrell Dapprich hanging out with us on the show today. Several folks, several key players throughout all of college football entered the transfer portal the first day of the window being open this spring, Darrell. We had an Auburn Tiger enter his name as well. We'll discuss the impact of that later in the show. But you just look at so many of these key guys, I think instant starters on this roster, and Auburn is already reaching out to some of these players. The guy that is most intriguing to me, and he's already got a relationship with Auburn, is former USC defensive lineman Isaiah Raikes. You talk about a guy that could do multiple things on the defensive front, a guy that is talented, a guy that already is comfortable with his staff but understands what Auburn means. I think this is a guy that Auburn needs to make a clear priority in the transfer portal.
Yeah, you mentioned about the familiarity that Auburn has. He also played at Texas A&M before he played at USC, so he knows DJ Durkin. I read somewhere where he's already toured Auburn and he's familiar with the Auburn campus. That's such an underrated aspect of this when guys jump in the portal, familiarity, knowing they've already been there. If they come back a second time for a second look, I just think that's, you're playing with house money at that point. This is a guy that can play three technique. He's he's very versatile. So, I would love for Auburn to lock up somebody like this. We talked about the defensive line needing some bodies. This goes beyond bodies. It's a premium over bodies. It's a potential starter. Now, remember, the ironic part about this is like Auburn kind of felt that way about Justin Rogers last year, and he wasn't really able to make that kind of impact. I think this guy could, and he's not going to really unseat anybody, but he would come right in, get in the two deep, and get a lot of snaps.
See, I think he's a potential starter day one, Darrell, and I think that's going to be part of the sales pitch to get a guy like Isaiah Raikes to commit to the Auburn Tigers in the transfer portal. We've seen the guy that he clearly likes DJ Durkin, or he would have committed to him at Texas A&M. And so there's already a relationship there, unless that just really ended poorly, which I can't imagine that it did. I think Isaiah Raikes is a guy who should be on the short list of names that Auburn should make a priority in the transfer portal. And you mentioned him at the three technique. I mean, no disrespect to anybody on Auburn's roster, but I think Raikes could elevate that position instantly. He's got to come in and learn the system, but also, hold on, he kind of knows the system already because he's played with DJ Durkin before. There's some familiarity there. And so I think all of that is extremely, extremely important. And if you're Isaiah Raikes, like, sure, I'm sure he's listening to NIL offers. I'm sure he's listening to several different types of sales pitches from coaches all throughout the country. But you just got to think it's going to mean a little bit more when it's coming from people that you've heard and trusted before.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think, from a talent standpoint, I absolutely think that he could come in and be a starter. My only reservation about anointing somebody in that is when they come in the fall as opposed to being here in the spring. I don't know how much you have to catch up. Now, if he's playing in a defensive system that he's used to because of who his former defensive coordinator is, now that you can make up a lot of ground. And that really does. It's a difference maker. It truly is.
One of the first national reports of Auburn reaching out to players. This was from On3's Steve Wiltfong. But he put out a report that Auburn reached out to the very talented Ohio State running back, Dallin Hayden, which I think he's pretty solid. He was better as a freshman at Ohio State than he was a year ago, but his usage also dropped dramatically. His first year, he ran the ball for the Buckeyes 111 times, over 550 yards, scored 5 touchdowns. Last year, just 19 carries for a little over 100 yards, just 1 touchdown. So usage rate dropped a ton, probably tied to why he left, and maybe we'll learn more about that situation as the transfer portal window goes on. But I think it's interesting that Auburn is one of the first few schools to reach out to him because, well, Auburn's running back room is pretty good, Darrell, and it's pretty deep, and it doesn't really seem like it would make a whole lot of sense to reach out to somebody unless you thought there was a chance that someone could leave. Am I reading too much into this?
No, you're nailing it. I think, first of all, looking at the freshman-sophomore comparison, as a freshman, he rushed for almost 600 yards and 7 TDs. It needs to be noted that his sophomore year, Ohio State was kind of trying to play games and redshirt him a little bit, where I read on some websites and know some people in the Columbus area, and they said that the guy was getting redshirted and they wanted to save him, and it kind of made him mad. This is a situation where if you thought, okay, we missed on Alvin Henderson and we didn't get a running back in last year's class, let's go pluck a very talented running back that has maybe 3 or 4 years eligibility left. That's not the case with this kid. He's got 2 years. So you're looking for more of an instant need fulfillment. And that tells me that you're reading the tea leaves right, that maybe somebody in the running back room is going, and so you need help right away. Again, if this guy was a freshman or a redshirt freshman and had a lot of eligibility left, you'd be like, oh, it's like getting somebody from last year's class. That's not the case with him. And so, yeah, I think that, you could be looking at a situation where somebody portals and he's a replacement.
Yeah, it kind of makes you wonder with the years of eligibility left, is this have something to do with, like, we've talked about Brian Batty being a name that would make sense for him to portal. This doesn't feel like a replacement for Batty. This feels like you're almost concerned with maybe a guy like Damari Austin leaving, which we didn't really talk about that, but you look at the state of the room, it's like any of these guys could leave and you'd be like, okay, yeah, I get it. But Damari loves Auburn. That certainly seems like something that he wants. But, to me, it matches more with his situation than anybody else's in the room.
He's a guy that's recruited actively for Auburn. He is one of those guys that has really done a great job. And so you would hate to see that. And he really came on last year when Hunter was suspended that one game and then trying to find his footing. Remember, Jarquez wasn't himself until like game 4.
Yeah.
This speaks
then
to
Damari
me
got hurt and you never really saw as much of him again.
Exactly. This speaks to me also, if that was the case, pure speculation, if somebody like him was leaving, this speaks more along the lines of Cobb's ascension and what his role means. It's a message that maybe Cobb is rising, a fast riser, and comes out of the spring higher than maybe people thought in the running back room, like instantly going to running back 2. Possibly.
Perhaps. Yeah. So both those guys, I think would make sense for Auburn, especially, just reading kind of some of the tea leaves of things going on. So we'll see exactly what that looks like. Several other guys that Auburn reached out to yesterday. We'll discuss their status and what it could mean coming up right here on Locked On Auburn. Darrell, today's show is brought to you by our friends at Monopoly Go, the best phone app maybe ever. I've been told I'm competitive. Darrell, you're competitive. That's why your whole body is sore because you were playing in an adult, was it softball league?
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
And
like it wasn't a senior league either. That's the mistake I made.
Yeah, sure. But we all have competitive sides, and our competitive sides, huge fans of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great twist on Monopoly where you can play on not just one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. And of course, you can mess with your friends. It's not just my competitive side that loves it. You can team up with friends and people all from around the world with time tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get in the game and join your friends like us. Download Monopoly Go now, free in your phone's app store. Darrell, looking at some of the larger names in the portal, there's some receivers that I think are just absolute studs that are there. And we all heard Hugh Freeze talk about the defensive line and the wide receiver room being 2 positions that they were going to be interested in the portal. And based off of early reports of Auburn reaching out to some of these larger names, one of them is Keandre Lambert-Smith, going to be one of the more highly recruited and highly pursued receivers in the transfer portal. He is from Penn State. Your initial thoughts on Auburn's chances with this kid and also just the potential impact he could have in this offense?
Well, it's going to be a dogfight. He is very highly coveted. I think it's going to take a very high NIL number. So you've only got so much that you can distribute. If you've got to get a defensive lineman, and you have to play that game, and so you have to understand how it spreads out. All the money spreads out. I remember watching him making a name for himself really early on at Penn State, and just being one of their best receivers. Yeah. So I think Auburn's got a good chance, but it's just going to depend on the number, and it's going to depend on if there's a couple other receivers that Auburn likes almost just as much. That's not such an NIL value that they're able to capture instead.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear people who have covered, his career every step of the way at Penn State and some of these kids at local schools. So let's jump to that. Here's Zach Sako with Locked On Nittany Lions.
Penn State wide receiver Keandre Lambert-Smith has officially entered the transfer portal as a graduate transfer. I'm Zach Sako, the host of Locked On Nittany Lions, and Lambert-Smith is in the portal, and he's going to be a sought-after target by many other Power 4 programs. But what exactly are they getting here in Lambert-Smith, who was the leading wide receiver for Penn State? Well, I would argue that was by proxy. Penn State's passing game was not good in 2023, and Lambert-Smith benefited from the fact that he was really one of the only wideouts that Penn State could throw to. However, after a strong start to the season, down the stretch, he completely disappeared. In the final 4 games of the season, including the bowl game against Ole Miss, he logged 2 receptions for a total of 28 yards. He was the number 1 wideout statistically for Penn State. I don't think he can be that at Penn State going into this season or at any other program. You're getting a very capable number 2 or number 3 option, but be wary, you are not getting a number 1. For more information on the transfer portal regarding Penn State players, keep it right here on Locked On Nittany Lions.
So I love Sako's perspective on this because the fact of the matter, the narrative around him entering the transfer portal was, yes, this guy's going to be the lead guy in the transfer portal this window, or at least the early candidate to do so. And now he's saying, well, he's probably not a wide receiver 1. And based off of early reports and early conversations with folks that you and I talked to, Darrell, this guy is demanding wide receiver 1 money. And based off of Sako's report there, and I think he uses valid stats to back it up, it's going to be interesting to see which schools think that it's worth it or not.
Very interesting, kind of counterpoints there. Number 1, I usually take with a grain of salt any host that talks about a kid that jumps in the portal. In this scenario, he's spot on. This isn't a case of sour grapes. We've seen that in other schools, like, people jump in the portal like, oh, he's not that good. That's all because the guy left your program. It's sure. Jaded. This scenario is very accurate, and it speaks to what I'm talking about. Remember seeing him early in the year and then watching the bowl game against Ole Miss, and he was nowhere to be found. Mm-hmm. This is a benefit for Auburn on 2 fronts. Number 1, Auburn doesn't need a number 1. They don't. We have a number 1, and it's a freshman. I'm sorry. I'm putting pressure on Cam Coleman, but he is him. Yeah. So Auburn just needs a number 2. The difference and the discrepancy is going to be if he wants number 1 money, good luck. Have fun wherever you go. If you're willing to get number 2 money and be a number 2 guy here, or even a number 3 guy here, because I love me some Robert Lewis, and I'm going to just say it and shout it from the mountaintops, okay? Yep. Then it's okay. It's why I think Auburn goes down its list and maybe captures another wide receiver that's willing to be wide receiver 2 or 3 and gets NIL money comparable to that.
Yeah, and some of those guys that we've seen their names, the kid from Syracuse, what is his name?
Dorian Brown, I believe his name is.
Damian Alford. Yeah, that I'm talking about from Syracuse. And then the Colorado State guy is Justice Ross Simmons.
That's the one to keep an eye on. That's the one I've heard a lot of buzz from some
Justice
people.
Ross Simmons.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of buzz from some former players that played on the offensive side of the ball. I reached out to a couple of them today and gave them 2 names, 2 wide receiver names, and this is the one that kept getting hits on. Okay. Here's the thing about him. 6'2", 6'3", 205, big wide receiver. I'll just be totally transparent. I remember watching him and him impressing me because I went to bed one late Saturday night and Colorado State was on, And I was hoping that Colorado would get its eyes beat out. So I was watching the game, and this kid just kept jumping off my screen and making play after play. And I was like, this kid's good. He's not going to be at Colorado State next year. Ironically, his name pops up as somebody that Auburn's interested in. So this is a guy that would make an impact, could probably be satisfied coming in at the NIL slot money of a 2 or a 3, and really make a difference in the wide receiver room.
Yeah, and then maybe my favorite guy so far that we haven't talked, Isaiah Raikes is probably one. This guy is number 2, and it's he's from Cal, Miles Jernigan. We've already seen Auburn go to Cal and get a guy once. I'm sure they've got a relationship. Sam Jackson, I'm sure, may be involved in this. We'll see. But also, like, we saw Cal's defense be pretty respectable against Auburn. And so you already kind of know what you're getting. Was it all Miles Jernigan playing that edge spot? I don't know. Spencer McLaughlin, who came on this show and just really loved up some Cal, he's got thoughts on Miles Jernigan.
Cal outside linebacker, defensive lineman Miles Jernigan in the transfer portal, a solid 5th-year player. Spencer McLaughlin here of Locked On College Football. Jernigan is going into his 5th and final season of eligibility as a college football player. Guy's certainly been in the weight room more than most players can say anywhere across the country, and everything you can describe about him is that he has been solid. The numbers from this past season not going to jump off the page as, oh my gosh, how'd he put up these numbers? That's incredible. But he comes in as a guy with a very, very high floor. Maybe not the ceiling you always look for, but you look at his PFF numbers, over 400 snaps played along the front 4 for Cal last year, and head coach Justin Wilcox, a good defensive mind to have been playing under for the last several seasons. And Jernigan put up real solid grades across the board, over 70 in the key metrics that Pro Football Focus looks at. So Jernigan in the transfer portal, a guy who you can get and can trust to come in and start with a high floor of production right away for your team.
Eligibility wise, I got him mixed up with the guy we're going to talk about next. That's on me. And thank you for Spencer for correcting me, even though it was a recorded thing. But all in all, still makes that room better. But a guy that I think if you do that, I still think strategically you need another guy in that room to kind of bolster depth for the future.
Absolutely. But this is a guy that if you need help right away, he can come in and start, or he could back up and make an immediate impact. He is a starter type guy. Here's the thing about guys like him and Sam. Hugh Freeze he's taking the Bruce Pearl approach when it comes to some of these transfer portal guys. What better to know a player or how a player makes an impact in a game than when you look across the sidelines at him? Mm-hmm. And with Auburn having played Cal and him being so disruptive, I think this is a kid that Auburn would covet, and I think he's a kid that could come in and start and play right away or play significant snaps. But he would give you this year, which is already, I feel like, going to be a good defense, just makes it even better.
Yeah. The other guy that it seems like Auburn could be tied to is the kid from Pittsburgh, which you're going to know a lot more about this guy than I am, Darrell, but Dayan Hayes is, I believe, how you pronounce his name. Dayan Hayes. He's an edge player from Pitt as well.
Very good player, very explosive off the edge, very disruptive, constantly in the backfield. The games I watched, and obviously I watched a lot of Pitt games if Auburn wasn't on, the only thing that you got to watch on him is that on draw plays and shovel passes and things like that, he sometimes overran the plays because he was so fast upfield rushing the passer. But he's disruptive, and he's a guy that Auburn players would love as far as his quickness, his explosiveness, perfect coming off the edge. Maybe a guy you take off the field in certain situations, maybe obvious run situations, because, again, he runs himself out of place sometimes, and guys blow by him. But if he pins his ears back and is to go get the quarterback, he's elite doing that, and Auburn would love to have him.
Yeah. Yeah, so certainly a guy to follow as well. We get the feeling they're going to get an edge defender. It could be either of these guys. So we'll see what happens with that moving forward. Let's talk about what Auburn lost yesterday and how that may impact this roster. We discuss that next right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Yahoo Finance. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Wouldn't it be great if you could see all of your investment and retirement accounts in one place? With Yahoo Finance, you can consolidate your views from multiple accounts into just one hub and access the expert analysis you need to tend to your entire portfolio with confidence. Whether you're a seasoned investor or just looking for that extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools you need in one place. You can securely link your brokerage accounts for a unified view of your wealth, including a 401k and other investments. A comprehensive perspective is what sets apart great investors, and it's how Yahoo Finance ensures that you have the insight to look at your wealth in its entirety. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor. YahooFinance.com, the number one financial destination. YahooFinance.com. That is YahooFinance.com. Darrell, all in all, like Auburn, the first day of the portal, and I don't know how much that means because there's so much time left, but other than losing Brenton Williams to the transfer portal, like at the time of us recording this fairly late in the evening, it could have been way worse for Auburn. I think every day that you can kind of go through and survive without losing a starter, I think is huge.
You wonder what goes on in those scenarios when you hear guys are going to jump in the portal. If they're ready to jump in the portal, they go in as soon as they can. It's a very competitive environment. You want to get your name out there. When they don't go right away and they're rumored to be having left or put their name in the portal, you wonder if there's some back channel negotiations going on, talking kids out of it, talking them off of the ledge, getting with their position coaches and saying, hey, look, don't make an emotional decision. This is how we're going to use you. Or is it a monetary thing? Is it a negotiation thing? Hey, I'm going to jump because this school can give me this much. And you're like, look, let's see if we can help out somewhere and get you that as well. You're valued. There's a lot going on now behind the scenes that could be reasons for delays. The longer guys don't jump in the portal, in my opinion, the higher percentage and the better chance you have of keeping them. And that, of course, is based upon if the coaching staff, it's not a mutual thing. Basketball, it was quick, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, Auburn found out right away with Holloway and Katie Johnson. And then, and Trey Donaldson, it was fairly quick that they went into the portal. But football, I don't know. It's a little more deliberate, and we'll see if Auburn can hang on.
Those not as fast paced. There's not some race to get enrolled by January, first, second, third, depending on whatever school you're going to when they start classes. This one, and we kind of learned this on the fly a year ago because we're like, okay, here we go. It's going to be crazy. A lot of people entered the portal, and then it seemed like it was weeks before Auburn and a bunch of schools did anything.
True. It's amazing because it's like chess. You wait to see who's going to jump in the portal, what positions of need. Yep. I think right away, if you're Auburn, you've identified 2 positions of need. Even if there's no attrition and nobody portals, you got to get a defensive lineman and a wide receiver. The
and I think an edge rusher.
Rusher.
I think that is kind of surfaced and solidified as well.
Running back or secondary would be based upon, in my opinion, somebody you didn't anticipate portaling, now portaling. And then you've got to reset
a reaction
instead of being proactive. And so, that's kind of what I think's happening. And you can always look, to me, someone told me 2 years ago when this whole thing started, when you start seeing particular schools go after particular players and contact them, it's very telling in who possibly could leave your football team if they haven't jumped in the portal already. It's an anticipation reactionary thing. So again, that's why the running back situation is very interesting for Auburn and the kid from Ohio State that they were looking at. It seems to me like something else could be coming, or if somebody doesn't leave, then you just cool your interest on that kid.
I think so. Yeah, I think you gauge it and you kind of put yourself in a situation where if you need to be aggressive and kind of bring in a running back or a defensive back or whoever it may be, you're in position to. Hugh Freeze has made it very clear, and I think this messaging is intentional, not only to the media and the fan base, but also to his locker room. It's like, if we recruit you, we think you're important and we want you here. And if you don't feel like you're valued, well, we didn't do a good enough job. That's kind of the messaging that they've put out there. And we're one day in. We've got a long way to go, and Auburn will have more guys into the portal. I think it would be shocking if that wasn't the case. But the fact that you look throughout college football at these big programs that get a lot of the storylines, and there's people just jumping into the portal like crazy. And we saw this last year when there was a change of a head coach and all that, which is expected. But now that you see that in other places, from the outside looking into these other places, you got to question the culture. It's like, well, what's going on here? Like Miami had a bunch of dudes into the portal. Colorado has become, that's just what Colorado is at this point. They're losing some pretty decent players. And it's one day. That's the caveat here. But you don't have a bunch of dudes that are just dying to get away from this program and this coaching staff. And I think that's telling. I think that's telling that these coaches are saying to these kids, like, we've recruited you. We want you here. We're going to build this through the high school ranks and through the recruiting classes and all of that. We need you for depth, and you're going to be a star here one day. That's at least the messaging. Does it all happen that way? I don't know, but I do think that was kind of good to see yesterday, the lack of action for Auburn.
Auburn sometimes gets shots taken at it for using words like family and culture and environment. And I get it. I mean, it is, championships matter and some of those things are, but I think that this is where you see that when kids are willing to be third on the depth chart and really don't see any kind of progression or future to start, but they want to stay because they love their coaches and they love the team and they love their teammates and the town and the campus and the university. That, that matters. That's special. Auburn gets joked on for that as a buzzword, that they always talk about it. But this is where it seems to kind of come to fruition when you see that and you look at portal numbers and who wants to leave.
Yeah. Yeah. And once again, I'll add the caveat one more time.
It's early.
It's early. Plenty of time. Plenty of things that could change. But all in all, we'll have you covered every single step of the way here on Locked On Auburn. Darrell, how can people check out everything that you've got going on?
Follow me on X, DAP6410. Love interacting Wednesdays and Fridays with you here on Locked On Auburn.
Yep. And please like the video. Please subscribe. Check out all of our written work at auburndaily.com. And we'll see you tomorrow. This has been Locked On Auburn.